Hello and welcome to the Meet Your Species podcast. My name is Heath, and today we have Justin. Justin, we met, basically from the upgrade, right?
Right, the online hatha yoga upgrade.
So if you guys don't know, I'm a hatha yoga teacher, and Justin is as well, and we're from the Isha Hatha Yoga School. So they have these upgrades every now and then, and this year, because of COVID, it was online for the first time, which is, it was the first online upgrade, right?
Right.
Which is kind of cool. I liked it. And anyway, we ended up getting to meet, and it turned out you were in the same state, which was kind of cool. I didn't even realize until recently.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, welcome, man. Are you ready to dive in?
Sure. I'll say what I can.
No worries. Cool. So, you said you grew up in Columbus, Georgia, right?
I grew up in LaGrange.
Oh, okay, LaGrange.
So it's about an hour south of here, Atlanta.
Gotcha. What is kind of paint a picture? Like, what is it like growing up there? What was that like for you, anyway?
So LaGrange is a very small town, probably about 30 or 40,000 people.
Oh, okay.
When I was there as a little kid, fewer people, and strong sort of Christian background in the community. Sort of provincial, insular, sort of in how people see the world. Mm-hmm. And when I was growing up, I never really felt like I belonged there. My parents were from out of the city, and it felt like when I was there that there were like the people who had lived in LaGrange for their whole life for like generations, and then there were other people who were sort of new arrivals.
Transplants.
And then there was to be accepted by that sort of nativist group could be challenging if you didn't go to like the main Baptist church or
gotcha.
Or if you didn't have certain beliefs, conservative beliefs, or practice certain customs. And my parents didn't do any of that, so I, for better or worse, kind of felt like a bit of an outsider when I was going through elementary and middle school.
Mm-hmm. Kind of hard years if you're not like part of the community. I moved quite a bit when I was younger, and so I definitely know what you mean. Like, if you're not in, then I don't know. It's just like a gap.
Right. I mean, it's not like, I'm not saying all the people like that, but there was a sort of general sense. Mm-hmm. But I went to a really wonderful art school.
You went to art school?
Yeah, from 3rd grade through 8th grade. It was like a
conservatory or what?
No, it was like a kind of liberal arts school for primary and middle school kids.
That's cool. So what's that like? What do they do differently?
So all the instruction was like arts based. So if you're learning about sentence structure, you're learning it in the context of a certain story.
Paint your ABCs.
Kind of, yeah. And then there was a lot of creative writing classes that I was able to do, and we had music classes, and there was a very strong PTA group. Like all the parents would raise money to bring in performers from out of state and other places.
Oh, cool.
Whether it's like Africa. I remember we had African drummers, and like professional storytellers would come and talk to us. And I, as a kid, I just thought it was just like, that's what school was, very normal. But it wasn't until I got to high school when it really wasn't that kind of format that I realized how special that school was. West Side Magnet School.
Interesting. So, were there any like you said, the performers coming and stuff? Were there any particular moments that kind of were inspiring or made you look at things differently?
I had a really, really great librarian, Mrs. Hornsby, who would, she would just give, I read a lot when I was a kid. Like that was one of I played tennis and I read. And that's pretty much and I did my schoolwork. Those are like the 3 basic things that I spent all my time doing. I don't know if I slept enough when I was like in 4th or 5th grade. Like I would just do my homework as fast as I could and then just like sit in bed and read from like 9 o'clock till past midnight or something. And just read all kinds of different stories, and I enjoyed being in my imagination.
Mm-hmm. What kind of books would draw you in?
A lot of like fantasy. It's always like kids, some kid who's on a quest.
Like Harry Potter?
Yeah, I read all the Harry Potter books when they first came out when I was a kid and really enjoyed those. Mm-hmm. But other books too, like people who sort of are removed from their normal everyday life and thrown into this world, which is sort of spectacular and strange and fantastic and terrifying at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And the kid's trying to like navigate that new world.
It's like coming of age kind of adventure.
Right. Very similar to entering the world of yoga, really. So it's like yeah.
So why tennis?
My father was a tennis coach. That's his job. Mm-hmm. And he managed a tennis club at a resort called Calorie Gardens.
Oh, that sounds familiar.
Pretty close to...
Didn't we...
Calorie Gardens?
Isn't that where we went for Christmas lights? Yeah, we went for Christmas lights.
Right, they have the Christmas lights, the fantasy and lights every year.
Mm-hmm.
And I spent a lot of my time as a kid there, just playing tennis. It's a very small club, very natural setting. Yeah,
it's gorgeous.
Yeah, it's an idyllic place really to grow up and play tennis.
Yeah, man. So
my father taught me how to play, and it was I probably, when I look back at it, I played because I just loved the game, and I loved the experience of being physical, but at the same time it was also like a way for me to get closer to my father, because we would play a lot, hit back and forth. And
so how would you describe him, like, as a person?
My father, he always described himself, I'm just an average guy. He's like okay with being an average guy, which has its benefits, but also its limitations, Like he just worked hard his whole life. I think he loved tennis from a very early age. I think he came to it a little bit later. And like the tennis world, if you start learning tennis when you're like 15 or 16, people think of that as like a late start.
Oh, okay.
So most of the great players, learn when they're very, very, very small. Because it's much easier to learn like these very subtle motor skills when you're, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Mm-hmm. And if you're playing competitive tournaments and you start playing when you're 16, the level is already very high. So it's hard to catch up. So I think he maybe felt a little bit of remorse that he didn't start earlier. Because I think he loved playing, and he probably dreamed of being a pro tennis player or a pro athlete.
So he kind of got you going pretty early.
Yeah, I think he wanted, like a lot of parents, wanted for me what he wasn't able to do for himself due to maybe circumstance or his economic upbringing. He grew up in like a very working middle class family in Philadelphia. They didn't have as much money, and tennis is kind of can be a sport of the aristocracy.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah,
it's presented like that.
So, yeah.
What about the rest of your family? Do you have siblings or?
I have one younger brother.
Oh, okay.
He's a furniture designer.
Oh, that's interesting.
So he spent a lot of time in China working for an Italian company that makes furniture for a lot of big box stores here in the U.S., like Crate and Barrel or Williams-Sonoma.
Interesting. Well, so what was your relationship like with him growing up?
I like my brother. I never felt like we were in competition, which was nice. He had very different interests than I had. He was very much into visual arts and painting, and he worked on cars.
He's like a designer.
Yeah. And I was more like writing, imagining stories and playing tennis. And
that's cool. So,
I say that about the competition because of my father's family. Like him and his siblings were like very competitive with each other, which sometimes would create friction, you know. I feel like I'm not being very descriptive, but
okay. Well, tell us. Do you have any like funny stories from your childhood?
Funny stories from my childhood?
Yeah.
Like I was telling you yesterday, we had this series of car mishaps.
Oh yeah, tell that story. That's funny.
So there was like, I think maybe because my father grew up with his family and his parents never really having nice cars or nice things, that when he actually bought things of his own, he was very afraid of things going wrong.
Mm.
So from cars that, you know, you had to clean the spark plugs every 10 minutes to get to school, to cars that were slammed into trees, or we had cars that were stolen by people. And there was one car that it was stolen and got into a high-speed chase and get driven off a bridge and
as you do.
Totaled. Yeah. There was a car that got blown up in our driveway by somebody who was lighting incendiary devices around town. So all this
natural.
But I think it speaks to like this kind of middle class scarcity mindset, or, you know, fear for security. That, you know, your parents, when you were growing up, you never had as much money that you felt like you needed to be well, and then that just carries on through the generations. So I think it's something that my parents have dealt with, and I've also seen in my own mind. That, you know, you want to buy something, but then you have to buy something, but you're like, you know, gritting your teeth as you put the monte down, because what if I can't get that money that I need to survive in some future time or something?
Yeah. What to do?
Right.
So what about any teachers or any other people that were kind of like, not even necessarily mentors, but like, I feel like it can be as simple as someone you meet just once, but they said something that kind of made you think differently?
When I was a kid?
And just any time.
Had a lot of people like that in my life. When I was in high school, like I watched a lot of Roger Federer videos.
Oh, who's that? I don't know.
He's like one of the greatest players in tennis.
Oh, a tennis player. That's right. I remember that name you guys were talking about.
And I didn't really care so much about his personality. It's more about just the way he moved and how in sync he was with the ball. Like there's a certain artistry, you know, in his style of play, and it's something I really aspired to.
Just like observing, trying to.
Yeah, and then I would watch these videos, and then I would spend a lot of time like in front of mirrors trying to like make my form look like his, and play the way he played.
There's a thing in dance where they worry about like the line, right? Like how the line of your body moves when you're moving.
Right.
Is it similar to, I mean, not quite to dance level, but when you're doing the tennis, just getting what you're talking about, like the way you're moving, the way he's flowing.
Yeah, there's like a sense of balance. Even if not static balance, but like dynamic balance. So like if you're moving in a certain way, you can move in a very balanced way, a very like almost symmetrical way. And how efficiently is the energy moving from the body into the ball. The best players have always been able to create a tremendous amount of energy in very constrained time situations, without forcing it, you know, like not just how you're able to how you're able to turn in certain ways, and it's hard to describe without like showing a video.
Yeah.
But anybody who's watched Federer knows what I'm talking about, because he can just hit really crazy shots and make it look effortless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for me, I wasn't watching tennis as much. I was more watching like, I was more into like X Games and this kind of like extreme sports. But I know what you mean. Like you find someone who's really mastered something. Like for example, with snowboarding, Shaun White was
Right.
the guy for such a long time. So when I was starting, I wasn't anywhere near that level. But just watching it, you could see like, oh wow, he's got a certain thing about the way he moves, and I can relate to that. Just observing and trying to see how to improve.
Yeah, it's also just an appeal to be a master of your mind and body. Anybody who's really good at a sport or an art, you know, they're only good at that because they understand on some level how their body works or how their mind works. So I think as a kid, especially reading all these stories, you know, of like fictional stories about people who came into these you might call them supernormal abilities because of a deep understanding of how their mind and body worked. It's like I always wanted that in the world of tennis, you know. If I can just figure out how this works and how this works, then I can play like Federer. That was basically it.
Just trying to figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can dig it. Any other people you want to share, like, was inspiring, or doesn't even have to be like someone famous, just random people in your life?
I had a religion professor, Professor Mark Wallace, when I went to school in college, who I think he was one of the people who started sort of my desire to understand who I am and sort of where I come from, and these existential questions, you know, like what is being and how does this all work? And so I took a lot of classes with him, reading all these like really esoteric French philosophers, thinking that maybe if I could understand like Jacques Derrida or Immanuel Kant or Levinas, that maybe I would be able to get to the heart of where I come from and what created me. But it didn't work, though. Didn't work? But maybe it set a foundation.
Like a foundation from which to...
Well, you know, like you are where you are because of all the moments you passed through, you know. I couldn't be here if I hadn't been doing that. If I hadn't done that, I'd be somewhere else here.
Yeah. Who knows where that is?
Right. No idea.
Okay. And so, when you were going through school, what did you, like, was there a difference in what you thought you wanted to do at a younger age versus after you kind of got out of school?
I had no real idea of what I wanted to do in school. I mean, I would say things to my parents, you know, I want to be a U.S. senator or something, or a lawyer or whatever. And maybe I believed it on some level, but in college, probably the strongest career idea I had was to be a professor of English or religious studies. But after like 3 or 4 years, I went to this liberal arts college called Swarthmore College, where people are very, very intense academically. I would spend, like a typical day for me would be like get up at 7 o'clock or whatever, you know, study for a little bit, go to class all morning. In the afternoon, go to some more classes or study. go to tennis practice, eat dinner, and then from like 7 o'clock to like 1 a.m, you're just in the library studying, just continuously.
Just every day like that?
Every day like that, yeah. Even on Sundays, you just go to the library and study.
At least you got a little tennis in.
Yeah, it was like tennis study. But after like 3 or 4 years of that, I was burned out on studying, and it was like, do I really want to be a professor and do this for the rest of my life? And I didn't.
What were the other people like at that school that you'd meet?
So similar people, very hardworking. I think it was like half of the student population were either like valedictorians or salutatorians of their high school class. Mm-hmm. So it's like everybody was just like used to constantly studying. And I was part of that too.
Yeah. That's a lot.
I mean, I'm happy I did it in some way, but on the other hand, when I look back, I wish I'd been a little more relaxed and not as hard on myself. Because you can demand so much of yourself that if you don't do it in the right way, that you create a lot of unhappiness for yourself. You create a lot of anxiety, and you set the course for like a mental schism.
So what after that? So after you
right, I went to like, just speaking professionally, I went to college and got a degree in English literature. Kind of spent a year after college like very depressed. I had sort of had a lot of like emotional challenges my last year of college from this kind of burnout of like working so hard and always, it was like this thing in my head that like if I didn't get like an A on everything, there was something wrong with me. And I think it was connected to some other false assumptions I had that my production, my performance, my was tied into my whether or not I felt like I was worthy of love or worthwhile, like a worthwhile person.
Gotcha.
And I think that's very common in sort of these top colleges, liberal arts colleges or otherwise, probably around the world too. I've talked to some other people who went to like IAT, in India or Harvard or Princeton or whatever. And it's this sense that if I don't perform, it's because I'm like I'm valueless.
Yeah. Well, at least from your experience at the college you went to, how do you feel, or do you feel there's a way you could get whatever like they're trying to get out of the school? Because normally you go to school for a purpose, right? You want to try and understand something or master a skill or whatever it is, whatever you're trying to do. Is there a way you could do that at that kind of school, or something you would change to make it?
Yeah, you let go of the outcome. Okay. You're just 100% invested in some passion or something you love to do, but you're not so emotionally tied to what the outcome is, because that's what causes the stress, right? If I don't get the A 4.0 GPA or whatever, that's an outcome. That takes, and that stress like seeps into everything that you do, especially if you're in a school environment where all the projects you're working on are ultimately graded, right? Yeah. So like it kind of sucks all the joy out of whatever you're trying to study. So you could be doing this. I feel like if I did it again, not going to do it again, but if I could do it again, I just wouldn't be so concerned about what the grade was. I would just, find things that I love to do and just put my heart into doing it, and that's all. And whatever happened, happened. I think back then I didn't really have the faith that that, putting your heart into something will bear fruit. I felt like if it wasn't recognized at that time as...
Oh, if you don't have the validation of the A.
Right, if you don't have the validation of the A, then all that work will go to waste.
Mm. Do you think that's something that is anything you would change in terms of like maybe the way the school is structured, or it's just about like a mindset shifting away from the goal?
I don't know I think I don't know if it's the way the school is structured. I think it's just the way people approach their study and what people value in their mind, And sort of like there were certain professors that understood what I was talking about. And I think that guy, Mark Wallace, he was one of those people, and he would just try to calm people down and be like, listen, if you get an A- on this paper, your life is not going to get ruined. Let's just look at like what you're actually here to do, which is understand. Use this material as like as a mirror to try to understand your own mind and beliefs and what you want out of life.
So
it's more of a cultural issue in universities. And if there was some like more, I don't want to say counseling, but maybe like more discussion or more classes. Maybe they already have that. I graduated in 2010, so it's been 10 years. But to try to get people to get the priorities straight,
Yeah. So you said, what was his name? Wallace?
Yeah, Mark Wallace.
Mark Wallace. So you said he was trying to help people figure out like, what do you want to do? Using this as a mirror to understand yourself.
Yeah, you're reading all these like really turgid philosophical texts, it's the kind of stuff that like look at it for like, you look at one page for like 15 minutes or half an hour and you read it again and you're like, what does this mean? And it's almost like I feel like reading a lot of these philosophers, like if I could understand like 5 pages, like really get the like 5 pages, then I would get connected to the rest of it. Like there's a lot of repetition.
Did it work?
Yeah, it would just take a long time to get that first
bit.
Yeah, but now I don't like reading that stuff now, but I think maybe on the plus side, it created a lot of like mental sharpness. There's a lot, in philosophy, and it's all about discrimination.
So what kind of like in terms of developing mental sharpness and using this kind of stuff to understand yourself better, what kind of things did you learn, I guess, about yourself?
What did I learn about myself?
Yeah, like
at the time or looking back?
Yeah. Well, I mean, both, I guess.
Because it's different,
Yeah. Like what was the thing you thought you learned, and then maybe now, what are you looking back at? How do you feel?
I learned how to write. I learned how to write and sort of like be able to put my thoughts on a paper so that somebody else could easily understand what I was trying to communicate. Which is not as, for me at least, it wasn't as simple as, just doing that. Because a lot of times you think you're saying something, but when somebody else reads it, they read something totally different. Yeah. And they don't understand. Like, well, I put it there, but you didn't. You didn't present it as you understand it.
Yeah.
So to be able to take that understanding and really put it on the page in a way that is easy for somebody to get.
It's like learning how to articulate properly.
Right, how to articulate things in language. And sometimes you have like feelings and thoughts that are prelingual. They're not. There's a certain perception you have of something that that takes a lot of effort to articulate, and it's like a skill that you practice. I think that's like most writers are working on that skill constantly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had someone who I was with for about a year in Atlanta. We were living together, and her mind was so sharp because she was much more well-read than I was. And there were so many times where I was like, I know I'm right, but I have no idea how to explain this to you. It was so frustrating to me. So that year spent with her really helped me figure out how to articulate it much better than I was previously. But yeah, I don't know. That was a difficult lesson to understand, even to realize that I'm not articulating it properly. And that's really the problem.
Yeah, it's something you just kept working at until you start to kind of get a hang of it.
Mm. So what led you from that? Like, how'd you get from there to yoga?
Right. So I was, I'm not really quite sure, but I have some theories.
Bring on the theories.
I was dating a girl in college. We were together for a long time, maybe 4 or 5 years. I really liked being around her, and in a way, she was like a kind of emotional crutch for me, because I was unhappy, doing all this, academic self-cutting, if you want to call it. So, the constant stress of, am I going to perform? Am I going to get into Harvard Law School or whatever idea I had back then? I think I wanted to be a Rhodes Scholar. That was one of my main goals.
What exactly is that?
So it's like supposed to be the ultimate in, the A guy. It's like the A of the A guy.
Oh, is it like
like Rhodes Scholars will, usually have like 4.0 GPAs, and you get a free scholarship to go to England and study at like an English university.
Oh, okay.
Either for a master's program, or I think some people continue and do like a PhD. There's just a lot of prestige attached to it.
So, but it's like a title you were in or something.
Yeah, it's like a
Gotcha.
like a scholar, kind of a fellowship, you could say, that you get out of when you finish your undergraduate.
Gotcha. So you thought you wanted to do that?
Yeah, I thought I wanted to do that, but because I was so attached to that result, it caused a lot of emotional pain. And so I met this girl, and and she was almost like a kind of, salve, for this emotional pain. And I think she had, a lot of times when you're in certain place, she was going through the same thing, I would imagine, or I think she was. Who knows? But I think she had a lot of high expectations for herself as well. So I think we were sort of like these emotional crutches for each other, because there was no self-love. You meet somebody and they say they love you, and must hold on to this person, right?
Yeah.
And then that ended a few years after I had finished college, and I'd even moved up to New York because that's where she was from, and I got a job up there, and it was, in my mind, I was going to live with her, and we were going to get married, and then we were going to continue in our life together. But that didn't happen. That ended, and then I got, not too long after that, I got fired or let go from my job as a tennis journalist in New York. I was working for a magazine called Tennis Magazine, reviewing a lot of equipment. Actually, I was like the racket guy or the shoe guy.
The racket guy.
So all the companies would send all their stuff to me, and I would write about it. So I used all those writing skills I got in college to write this kind of like quasi advertorial material.
Yeah. Subtle.
It's like supposed to present it as a review, but there's so much pressure from the magazine has these advertising partners who are also making this equipment that are giving it to the magazine and being like, make sure you give an objective review about this, So I was doing that, and I got let go from that job. So I'm minus the girl that I love, minus a job and a sense of security, and then back home living with my parents. And it's like, well, what now? And then I got diagnosed with a thyroid issue.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So my energy was all screwed up and just very, very unhappy. I was trying to do different things to kind of come out of that. I did some volunteering for like youth soccer organization, was teaching some tennis, but overall just sort of felt like, I was a failure and very depressed. Parents are like, what are you going to do with your life? What's wrong with you? Sleeping a lot. Just not in a good place. And then I came across, I don't know how, but all these sort of documentaries about Tibetan Buddhist monks, and which led me to Sadhguru. I started watching his videos and doing some of the meditations, and it helped me a lot. And one thing led to another, and entered into yoga world as a kind of self-treatment.
Yoga world. I'm curious, when you said you were in like a religion class, right? In college?
Yeah.
Did they go into anything on yoga, like Eastern stuff?
Yeah, I took a class called Patterns of Eastern Religions. But it's all presented as like a very, intellectual system. Like there's no experiential side to it. Like they didn't. I think if I had been doing meditation at that time, or had been introduced to yoga concurrently with reading these, religious texts, that they would have a very different meaning than they had then. Then it was more like, I gotta, just Buddhism means this, this, this. I gotta memorize this list. We have a test on it. So, and once in a while you read this stuff and you're like, oh, that's pretty interesting, But so it does go in here somewhere, which was useful in the future, especially in some of these like spiritual experiences. I find myself remembering some of those things that I read and understanding them differently. But
were you able to help the thyroid thing with that, or?
Yeah, I think it was like a lot of because of the thyroid issue, I learned a lot about nutrition, changed my diet, and learned a lot about different ways of supplementing to improve the health of your thyroid. I think most of the thyroid issue was emotional, really, because if your body is in a constant state of stress, your glandular system is not working properly. Yeah,
releasing all those stress chemicals.
Yeah, so like doing the different Isha programs. So I did the inner engineering and BSP and Shunya and did all the programs. It created a different sort of emotional baseline, which makes me feel much better now than then, definitely.
That's good.
Yeah.
Seems to be working then.
Yeah. I'm happy to have done it all.
And so why did you decide to go for the teacher training then?
I was talking to Shravani about this last night. So when I first discovered Sadhguru, it was like, on the one hand, I was very, very curious about what he was saying, it's like, you watch these videos like, this guy actually does know something here, And I wanted to know and experience what he seemed to know and experience. So that was a motivation to get into yoga world. But at the same time, though, it was like I was so unhappy where I was that I was highly, highly motivated to do whatever, meditation or yoga was required to come out of that situation in my experientially, not necessarily change the situation of my life, but at least not like suffer so much.
Yeah.
So I started doing one of the free meditations online, the Isha Kriya. I would do it like 7 hours a day.
7 hours. Oh,
yeah. Because I would like sit down at like 8 or 9 p.m. There was like in one of the back rooms of my parents' house I was staying in, and just sit cross-legged and like lean against a wall and just close my eyes and just start doing it. There's like a mantra in that meditation: I'm not the body, I'm not the mind, I'm not. So I would just say that over and over again, and like just if my mind went somewhere else, I would just keep bringing it back and just keep doing it.
It's like sharpening the...
I guess. And as I did that, though, it was like I started to notice all these weird sensations that I'd never felt in my body, noticing my breath moving in different ways. Like I remember there was one point where I felt like I wasn't really breathing. Like it felt like I needed air, but I was just sitting there and I was fine. Like things like that. It's like I'd never really been aware of my breath, or it was just things were very different. So I did that for a couple of weeks, and I'm still not exactly sure how it happened, but I had what people call like a Kundalini experience. So it's like I went outside one day, and all of a sudden it just felt like it's actually quite painful. Like it felt like I got electrocuted. Like it was like electricity like running up through my body. I remember how it felt like it was like snaking through my arms and like up my body, and actually like knocked me to the ground. I was, crying, and I'm like, what the hell? No, nothing in my education had prepared me for that. I had no idea what was going on. It was like, on the one hand, what followed that was a couple of weeks of like seeing the world in like a totally different way. Things felt looked like they were moving in slow motion. Like I went to play tennis, and the ball's like coming at me like this, I'm like, wow, this is... And you just like looking at like the trees and the flowers just like moving, and everything just looks so fantastic. I remember one night I was like walking, and it was like misting, and I thought I like died, really. Like maybe this was like the process of dying, and I was about to get like picked up by some spirit being or something and like whisked away to another world, because it was so different, and I had no context to understand like what had happened. And then I kind of came down from that experience and was sort of better, definitely better than where I was beforehand. Like kind of more of a sense of stability and inner balance, but just wanted to understand like what the hell was that? What is that? And then I just figured like, all right, well this seems to have been caused by that Sadhguru meditation, so he must know what's going on, what this is about. So that was like why I did all these programs, and
just to figure it out.
Try to figure out like what was that? So to kind of understand better understand the importance of, like in yoga, not just raising your energy levels, but having like the balance of mind and body to be able to hold that energy and experience it without like going crazy, which I definitely had gotten very close to. Some people, I think a lot of people who go to mental institutions, they may have had experiences like that, but they happen in the wrong times, or they misinterpret what it means.
Just to know what's going on.
Yeah, and it can be it can be a liberating thing, but also it can be highly, highly destabilizing. A lot of people, I'm not the only person who's had this, but
yeah, no, I think whenever I had been around people doing certain like psychedelics and stuff when I was in my early 20s, I noticed like some people got clear and some people, I don't know where they went, but they didn't really come back.
right.
I don't know. I don't know what their experience was, but it didn't seem like they became more stable after it.
Yeah, it could like break some people, right? And other people can really transform their lives.
Mm-hmm. This is very interesting, but
so I think the yogic approach is very, very sane and very healthy.
They make it very. I think the way he described it is like building a staircase versus jumping on a trampoline.
Right.
It was very apt. You're just slowly tick, 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 building the staircase, and then, at some point you get there, but you're stable. And
this has to be able to handle that, your mind and your body. Mm-hmm. There were some times during that first experience where I had gone to the beach for the wedding of my cousin. I was acting very, very strange. But I remember walking on the beach and it was like...
He was acting strange? You were acting strange?
I was acting very strange,
Okay.
Wandering off on these like random walks down the beach. And, there's all kinds of things going through my head that I won't go into because I don't know how relevant it is for people. But I just remember walking on the beach and feeling like I was, every step I was taking, I was getting like shocked, like on the bottom of my feet.
And you wanted to keep walking?
But I was like, it was like painful. It hurt a lot, but at the same time, it was like the wildest and most interesting thing that ever happened to me. So there was these two things like pulling. One thing like wanted to draw back from that experience and be like, okay, I need safety. This is like really pushing the boundaries of what I consider sanity. But on the other hand, it was like, this is the most fantastic and fascinating thing that's ever happened to me. And I didn't want to go back from that. Mm. So there was this sort of push and pull going. But now I look back at it and it was just, a lifetime of eating whatever people in mainstream society eat and thinking the way most people in mainstream society think. And like those kind of patterns of living and behavior are not good preparation for that level of energy, Mm-hmm. So I think like what I've learned, what made me interested to go to the Hatha Yoga school was to really stabilize this further so that I can live with that level of, like what Sadhguru calls it, like that level of voltage. That's like the best term that I've heard to describe the energy. Mm-hmm. That when the voltage gets cranked up, this has to be able to handle that and be able to experience it in a balanced way. And your mind and then the mind especially, it has to interpret it in the most healthy and
just not freak out.
Not freaking out, right?
Yeah. Shrav, how are we on time? I don't want to make you late for your bus.
No. Okay.
It's 2:30.
2:37. Okay, good. So we have...
I think as long as we leave by, what, 3:30 or something?
Yeah.
The bus leaves at 4:15.
Okay, so we should be good. All right, cool. So then you went for the training. What was the most unexpected thing on this whole yogic journey? Like, you go into it thinking like, okay, I need to figure out what is all this. And it's definitely not something you read in a book. Like,
no.
It's going to be like this. So
there are books about it, but they're not, you have to look for them.
Yeah, and probably speak a different language than English.
Right. Yeah. You're saying what was the most surprising thing that happened?
Mm-hmm. Or people you met, or like whatever.
I think it's all so many surprising things. Like, it's just, you think that the weird thing about awareness is it's like you think you are a certain way. you just think that's the way it is because that's all you've really experienced. And then something happens. There's like some click or whatever. And then you go, that's just just an idea. It's not, that's not me. And there's a kind of,
wait a minute.
yeah, there's like a stepping back, like, wait a minute, I've never stepped back from this. Like I've had this going through my head for probably like decades and I'm now just stepping back on it. You feel very, very relieved on the one hand, but also like very stupid. You're like, man, it took me this long. I'm like in my 30s and I'm just seeing this now,
Yeah.
So there's a lot of those moments.
Yeah.
Doing all the different programs, Isha programs and practices. But Hatha Yoga School in particular, I just found it they're able to strike that balance between ensuring, this is very rare, to strike that balance between ensuring that people are disciplined, because, how are you going to stabilize this unless you have some kind of practice or discipline, But at the same time, they do it in a very warm and supportive way. Because I've been to tennis camps and where it's a very disciplined environment, but it's done in a very abusive way.
Like a boot camp kind of thing?
Like a boot camp, yeah. Or I remember I worked at this camp on Hilton Head Island. I won't say the name of the camp. But the players there were great. The kids were nationally ranked, and I was like a hitting partner, and sort of they let me teach a little bit, and then I would learn, and I would participate in some of their programs and improve my own game. But I remember a lot of times one of the coaches screaming at 13 or 14-year-old kids, the kids crying. About
that seems a bit much.
Yeah, he's like, well, why didn't you got to hit that forehand earlier, and what's wrong with you, that kind of thing. So there's discipline there, but it's done in such a way that the kid is emotionally harmed. Yeah. So the wonderful thing about the Hatha Yoga School is, they push you, no doubt about that.
Oh yeah.
Everybody gets up at 4:00 in the morning and goes and does your practice, and if you don't get there on time, they sit you out and have a talk with you. So all that is there, but the experience you're feeling is this is a very warm and supportive place, and people really want the best for me. Mm-hmm. And that's something I never really. It's something an environment that I've rarely experienced.
Yeah, it's a wild place. I've never seen. Not just the school, but the whole ashram running on volunteers with that large of an organization is, right. It's a feat. Yeah, and
you have to ask, why are all these people doing that?
Yeah.
When I first got involved at Isha, I was a little bit scared. I thought maybe this is just a bunch of insane people in a cult, Yeah. But as you do some of these programs yourself and have these, I don't know what you want to call them, spiritual experiences, and you talk to people and you hear their stories, you start to understand that, okay, people are having very, very powerful experiences and shifts in how they perceive things. And that's why, and because these shifts have been so beneficial for them, that's why they're giving so much of themselves to this organization without expecting any payment, or because it becomes the most important thing.
Yeah.
To experience that yourself and to want to give that to your friends and family, and so that people don't have to suffer for no reason. All the suffering is just, it's all
here.
Nonsense and conditioning in your head.
I'm curious, since you have a much more academic background than I do, and especially the kind of college you were going to. What I've found the tendency in the West is, when it comes to all the spiritual stuff, is to try and make it intellectual. Like you're saying, that religion class is breaking it into a
right
thing like that.
Step-by-step thing.
And whenever whenever I listen to either Sadhguru or just whatever they're teaching in the programs, it's like somehow they're giving you a lot of information. At the same time, they're not giving you much of anything. There's like this interesting balance, like how to articulate it in a way where they get the point, what they need, but not overly,
Right.
oh, like I understand it all now kind of thing.
Right.
How did you feel about it coming from that more intellectual kind of academic background?
When I first got involved in going to the Isha programs, it was definitely like I was listening like I would be in a class, trying to organize everything in my mind constantly. So you take some piece of information and you want it to, it's like imagine all the information in your mind is in a certain structure. And then as a new piece of information comes in, you want to anneal that, or you want to place that in the structure that you have so that you can remember it or you can use it more easily. But sometimes your structures, it's not the right structure, and it's a certain paradigm that may not account or may not be open to this type of information. So I think my first maybe couple of years, I was spending a lot of time just like sort of reorganizing the structure in my head. And that is an intellectual thing. It is the kind of intellectual work, to be asking a lot of questions yourself. Like as you're eating your meal, thinking like, well, he said this, but that guy said this, and how does that line up again? And it's a lot of that sort of work. I don't do that so much anymore because I find it at a certain point it becomes like very tedious. And now it's more like just paying attention to everything that's going on in here and just watching it. And then letting that, if your mental or emotional structure needs to be rearranged, just like letting that happen on its own, instead of trying to like force it into a particular arrangement that you think it should be in.
Fit in this box because that's the way I think it is. Right. Yeah.
I guess maybe that's like maybe one way of understanding how he says going in installments. Sadhguru says, people want to go in installments on their spiritual journey. It's like I came with all these, boxes and concepts that I had learned in school. And because it took me so much effort to gather them,
they're precious.
They're very precious. I don't want to lose all of them. So maybe one piece of information comes and it's like, okay, this information plus my experience means that this concept is definitely not correct. But maybe all those other concepts over there, we're going to hold on to those. So it's the process is, it's like you're like very, very unwillingly parting with all these precious concepts that you've had. So, but now it's more like, because I've seen how many of wrong assumptions and things I thought I knew that I really don't know, that now it's just the only thing I really believe in is just paying attention to this, and whatever needs to happen will happen. It's like a more, I don't know what you want to call it, like a right brain approach, maybe. Just a more open approach.
I mean, even that is logical, right? Like simply paying attention, because it's not coming to any assumptions like, okay, I just need to learn to focus, see what's going on. I'd say it's pretty logical.
Do you think it's a logical thing?
Well,
I don't know if you have to do anything, though. You just have to pay attention.
Yeah, but I mean, to have the willingness to look at it without coming to conclusions is in a way can be a very dry thing, because you have to remove all the extra jumps and conclusions that it is easy to come to. So it's very like cutting through in a way.
Yeah, it does. It does feel like kind of dry sometimes. You just constantly like staring at something.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like,
Internally.
for me, he said something about water, like, what is this water? And it's like such a basic statement. It's like, oh, well, it's water. Okay, but what is that? Like, when I started thinking about that, I was like, okay, I don't know. And once I finally came to that point when I don't know, then I had to think, okay, what do I know? And there's not a lot.
Right.
But you have to go through and just keep dismantling all those things. And I feel like that takes a lot of mental, what do you call it? Discipline, I guess.
Yeah, it's like you keep at it.
Yeah.
You don't give up.
I don't know.
You don't. It takes a certain faith, doesn't it? That paying attention. Like what you say there, but I don't. Okay, so I don't know. If I know I don't know, then I'm more willing to pay attention because I want to know.
Yeah.
And because I don't know, I'll just continue paying attention.
It's not really, is that faith? I don't know. How do you
It
describe
is a certain faith that like your attention can yield something. That through attention that you can know something. I mean, a lot of other people might say, okay, I don't know and I'll never know. My father's of that opinion.
But that for me is more belief than anything. Because like, for example, these plants, when I pay attention to them, I was growing a catnip plant once. And I started noticing each and every day I'd water it and I would turn it slightly because the sun was just coming from one side. I noticed that each day the plant was trying to adjust. And then I realized like, oh, I'm making this more difficult for the plant because it has to keep moving itself every day.
Right.
So like that, just by paying attention to it, I started learning things. And I do that with everything, right? So It wasn't so much like I believe that'll yield something. It's just that's how it's always been. Like
in the natural world, though, you're saying you pay attention to something, you can understand how it works.
I mean, anything, right? It's just a question of...
Yeah, but there is a kind of jump, though, isn't there, from saying, okay, if I pay attention to the plant, I know, I'll know what best soil I need to put into it, or, what the best place in the yard is for it. There's that, but but when you go into like, if I pay enough attention, I'll know the source of my being. There's a jump between that and that.
Sure.
But for me, that's like a certain faith that it's like if I pay enough attention, if I really, really pay attention, I will get it, or more likely than not, like it will get me.
I don't know. I mean, I know what you're saying now.
But to balance that dryness, because that attention takes a lot of just, you keep paying attention. I got more recently interested in chanting mantras and practicing devotion. One of my favorite, in the last few weeks, one of my favorite things to listen to is the Heart Sutra. It's like a Buddhist chant. And as I understand it, they say, like form is emptiness and emptiness is form. And if you get that, then if you see that everybody is out of the same stuff and you experience that, it's like similar to kind of the BSP experience, then it's much easier to have compassion and love for all the life around you. Mm-hmm. It's almost like a kind of mental way of going at that. But I find that it does make me feel more open to people and kind of sweeter, which makes the attention part more fun.
Sure. A little more juice.
Yeah, more juice.
I like the oatmeal because the berries are in it, right?
I know, you need juice. Without juice, it's like it's hard to sustain some kind of practice.
Mm. So, with all of this I guess it's not 2020 anymore, but the pandemic stuff that's coming, or it has come, and here we are in this whole situation. How is that, like, I guess more in like a looking forward kind of seeing what you think about it. Where do you think all this is kind of going based on what you're seeing?
What effect the pandemic is having on people?
Mm-hmm.
It's having all kinds of effects and more. You know?
Well, yeah. I just mean because you're living somewhere other than where I'm living, so different people, different experience.
Yeah, I find people have wildly different interpretations of what it means. And because I've heard so many, I really honestly don't know what it means. I know there's a certain biological reality to it. But like in terms of, you look at statistics of sort of like death rates per year, they definitely have gone up.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of like what is causing that, is it purely just like a mechanical virus, or is there some sort of other type of virus that's happening? I think there are a lot of causative factors coming together. And, how people use their mind in an event like this on a collective scale, has effects on people's health.
Mm.
I play tennis with a lot of people who, they believe that the virus is just a flu. And then I know other people who feel like it's like, if I take one wrong sniff, it's going to kill me tomorrow.
Yeah.
Some people think that all the vaccinations are fraudulent, and other people feel like, we should excommunicate all the people from society who have reservations about vaccination. So I've heard the whole gamut from different people that I know, and to be quite honest, I have no idea what the pandemic means.
Well, what has it meant for you? Because we've had.
Well, okay, what it means, like in a like global sense, is different than I guess what it means for me.
Mm-hmm.
What it's meant for me is just feels a little bit more of an acceleration of becoming more aware.
Mm.
Like I think a slightly more chaotic external situation can cause you to be more interested in looking at yourself and sort of why you're doing what you're doing and why you're saying and believing what you're believing.
Mm.
I think before the I'll preface this by saying, like, after the teacher training in 2019, so I flew to China in January.
Oh.
to visit my brother, who was living in China at that time. He lives in Vietnam now, but I just thought I was just going to be there and taking care of his dog while he went on vacation to Japan and hang out in his apartment and walk around China, and I wasn't really keyed in too much with the news. I had heard that there was this thing going on in Wuhan, but that was like 700 miles away from where my brother lived in Dongguan. I was like, whatever. So I land in China, and it's like the first day I'm there, I'm all of a sudden I'm feeling like, man, I don't feel good at all. Like this I feel like really sick. And I had been there before, and there's a lot of air pollution, so I just thought maybe I'm just, just having a lot of sore throat, but I just felt like really tired and not good. I was still doing my hatha yoga practice, which maybe just kept me going. But it took about almost 2 weeks for me to not feel sick again. So I look back and I wonder, like, did you get it? Did I get the virus at that time? I don't know. I never got tested for antibodies or anything, but I suspect that I probably did have it.
So when did you make it back here?
In in March.
Also, like, were the lockdowns already starting?
Well, that's the thing. So I was in China, and my brother was calling me up saying, like, listen, Justin, you have to leave the country because they're shutting the borders from China to Hong Kong. I was like, what? They're doing what? I was like, yeah. so when my sense about, I didn't want to be in China during it. I didn't want to get stuck in China during this pandemic situation because
that doesn't sound
you
ideal.
just don't know. I'm very over there, like you get a. China has a lot of surveillance and a lot of, government intrusion into people's lives, and it's very much the closest thing to a totalitarian state that I've ever experienced. It's like, you go down through a park and you've got like every block is like a giant camera, with like speakers next to the camera, like
just in case they had to talk to you,
playing all kinds of like political messages and stuff. So the reason I'm mentioning that is before the pandemic, I was just very, very suspicious of propaganda and how control, whether it's like how governments exert influence or how corporate entities exert influence, and the kind of tactics that they use to get people to internalize the message that they want to project into the world. Mm. So I had actually studied that for years. There was a guy a very famous propagandist named Edward Bernays, I think his name was. And he called it, I think, I'm trying to remember the term he used. It was like it was like the engineering of consent. So if you can get a certain number of like experts in certain fields to sort of be on your side, and you arrange them in a certain way and present information in a certain way, you can
like convince
people something is the case, which may not be the case or may not be the full story. So initially I was kind of seeing the virus through that lens, like, what's actually happening, and what is being presented as happening, which will benefit sort of large, powerful entities. Mm-hmm. But as this year has gone by, like I'm less and less interested in knowing that.
Like about propaganda?
Yeah, I'm less. I mean, I know that the virus is definitely, worse than the flu, from what I can tell. Maybe I'm just not as full of not full of as much fear of some like big bad boogeyman, trying to engineer my life in the way that they see fit.
Or like injecting you with microchips or whatever.
Right. All that stuff. Like, I'm not as concerned about that.
Mm. But so
somehow the going through the pandemic has made that shift a little bit. Not as worried about like getting controlled, or I feel like I can still determine the course of my. I'm not being very articulate here, but do you understand what I'm trying to say?
I know what you mean. It's I think I'm more concerned with like Facebook ads than government propaganda at this point. We watched this documentary, The Social Dilemma. Did you see that?
I haven't seen that one.
Basically, they just had a lot of people that worked in the tech industry explaining the exact technique, probably what you know from this propaganda, like exactly how to push the needle on conversions for ads. It doesn't have to be for buying products. It can be for just about anything. Right. But specifically keeping them on the platform is what they used it for, because that means more ads get shown. And so the one takeaway I got that I thought was really, really great to encapsulate it in one sentence is, if you're not paying for it, you are the product. And I was like, oh yeah, that's very true.
What does that mean? If you're not paying for it, you are the product.
Well, you don't pay for Facebook, do you? You're the product. Your attention is the product.
Right. Okay.
So it's not like they haven't designed these platforms in a way where it's for you to connect to other people and meet your family and all this. It's like, no, how long can I keep you on here, and what's the rate at which I can give you ads to sell these products? And that's their profit model, right? Right.
So, your conditioning is their profit.
Yeah. And I mean, once that's established and you're paying for attention, okay, now if I'm some unscrupulous actor from who knows where for whatever motives, how can I manipulate this with enough money to influence something? Even if it's only 5%, it could be massive or billions of dollars for me if I'm, whatever, or any other nefarious reasons.
I guess that is, okay, that's, before the pandemic, I was very, very concerned about how unscrupulous actors, that's a good term, were trying to manipulate my behavior in ways that benefited them but hurt me. But as I've become more aware and sort of learned how my mind operates, and I don't feel as open to that.
Not as susceptible.
Yeah. So that's kind of also one of my interests. Initially in doing yoga was to be free, be more independent. To not be, if you're not attached to your mind, if you have some distance between you and what goes through your mind, then if somebody tries to plant something there that's not in your interests, or it's not going to take you in the direction that you want your life to go, you don't have to take a bite out of it. You can just let it go by.
Fair enough. You just triggered a memory for me. One of the first things that I was thinking before I got into yoga or any of this is, okay, what's the worst thing that can happen to me? I mean, apart from like being tortured or something, let's leave that aside. Probably the worst thing I can think of is, would I be put in prison or something? Like put in a box. That's like the complete lack of autonomy or freedom. And so I thought, okay, how do I make sure even if that kind of thing happened, I'd be good? Well, if I can just sit still and be like blissed out,
then you're in good shape, right?
All right. I mean, still don't want to go to prison, but at least I'd be good. And that was like, that's such a strange place for me to think back and be like, that was my mentality going into all this. I just want to not have a problem if I go to prison.
Didn't your family go to prison?
No, there was no reason for me to even think, oh, you're going to go to prison. Like,
it's a good thought experiment, though.
Yeah. I guess.
It's like if you take a really extreme environment like war or something, it's like, if I can be happy in war, I'll be in good shape in life.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to be happy in war, but I know what you mean.
Yeah. Like they always tell the story of Krishna, like,
oh yeah, and joyfully
laughing in battle or something.
Yeah, but he also spent like how much time trying to prevent the war from happening in the first place.
Right, of course. But if you are compelled to be in that situation, or you're thrown into it.
Yeah, just be good. Like, all right.
Though I guess you shouldn't be compelled. You should, if you're there, you should be there consciously. Anyway,
diving down that rabbit hole. So I'm curious, what are when you meet new people, what are the characteristics that you value the most?
Characteristics?
Yeah, like. Some people might be honesty. Some people might be this, like whatever. What are the things that you value in other people? Like when you meet someone new, I can find a way to enjoy just about anybody's company. But there's some people that like, for example, I really appreciate when someone's able to say what needs to be said, even though it's hard, it might hurt somebody's feelings or whatever, but this really needs to be said. Like that's a characteristic in somebody I really appreciate. Like what are the things like that you value in other people that you come across?
You were saying courage there, right? Courage to say things that are needed. Or value in people.
Or in yourself.
I think a lot of times when I meet new people, I don't really care how they are. I mean, I'd like to meet people who are unique, you don't want to meet somebody that you've already met, just in a different body. I mean, it's more fun to converse and engage with people who say things that you've never thought about and ask you questions that you've never asked.
So like being unique or different or something new.
Yeah, something that and usually people who do that are usually people who are curious in you. They're curious in you or interested in you because they're also interested in themselves. They want to know about themselves, and so when they're asking somebody, it's like they're asking somebody a question. It's almost like they're using somebody as like a mirror for themselves.
Oh, what will they say? What will I think about that? This kind of thing.
Or not like you ask somebody a question because you want to know it, Like you genuinely ask the question. You're not asking the question because you have the answer and you want the other person to struggle, and then you can like give them the answer. And show how
I'm so smart because
No, not like that. So you really want to know something, or you're really confused about something, and like I was like driving back last night. I was like talking to Shravani a lot about sort of the like nuts and bolts of like romantic relationships and sort of how that functions and how people see it in different ways. It's like something that I've never really been too clear about. Sort of how can like a romantic relationship exist alongside like a sort of feeling of love for a lot of people or love for everybody. Like how those two things work together? So I was asking her those questions because I don't know the answer. And then listening to her talk about how she sees it, it's like you're listening in like two different ways. It's like I'm listening to her, but I'm also watching myself listen to her. And you start to, as she says certain things, or as somebody you're conversing with says certain things, and there's this weird rising up of all kinds of stuff within you that you've never really seen clearly. Which is good. It's very good. You become more conscious of something that's been kind of sunken, murky silt within you somewhere in some dark pocket.
Like the spleen.
Yeah. There's
nothing good going on over there.
So that's what I value, I think, in meeting people. Is this can our interaction like help both of us become more conscious? Versus sometimes a conversation could be just about like forming a tribe or forming an alliance. Like, well, those people over there, we're better than them. Like kind of like that. Or, like it's sort of boring, those kind of interactions.
Yeah. I always struggled with small talk, and I thought that I was I thought that meant I was like an introvert or something, because I didn't enjoy the, hey, how's it going? Oh, I'm doing good. How are you? It's like the same loop.
Right.
You're not saying anything. And
I kind of like it though, in a way. There's sort of like it's like a way of emoting. It's like you're kind of like firing up the connection. You say certain words that like get you to connect on like an emotional level. Like, how's it going today, man? Yeah, I'm going good. You doing good? Good.
Doing good.
I mean, nobody actually believes that those words mean anything. It's more like just remember we used to have like dial-up as a kid?
Oh.
Yeah, when you're connecting to the internet.
Yeah.
So it's like that, it's like a couple words here and there. It's like you're dialing up and connecting to that other person.
That is the most interesting way to describe it I've ever heard. It's like dial-up.
Yeah, the small talk is like dial-up.
Slow and odd noises.
And maybe certain people want a certain amount of dial-up because they feel like, do I really want to connect to this person, I have to ask a couple. I have to go through some procedures before I decide, do I want to connect with this person?
There's a preliminary process.
Preliminary, right. For other people, it may not be, the one.
Maybe I should look at it more that way. Because I feel like sometimes if you open up into a situation, then you get into a conversation you really didn't want to have. Like, I've been on a plane and there were some people who seemed really nice. So I just like opened up and started talking to them. And they just went straight into a rant on Jesus or something for like 40 minutes. And I'm just like, I would much rather read the book than be here. But because I have an interest in writing fiction, I'm always open to anybody who want to rant about Jesus to me. Because it's like, this is like a character here, maybe I could put this person. I guess that character needs a little bit of meat to them, and maybe, she could say certain words. Oh, that person would say that. So something a little self-interest in listening to that's nice. English majors.
But people I think everybody really, for the most part, people believe what they say. And that's interesting. It's like, why does this person believe this? Because it's very, even if it's like the most bizarre, I used to kind of like talking to homeless people. I feel kind of scared doing it. Like if some guy just approach you on the street and ask you for money or something. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to give any money to him because I don't know where that money going to go. But sometimes I gave out of guilt or whatever. But you just you start talking to them and they have the most bizarre beliefs about, who knows what. But there is a logic there,
Oh, totally.
It's like, there is a reason this guy or this woman is speaking like this. Mm. It's like, if I can understand that, then it's like, if I really understand that, then somehow I can understand something else about this. Like using that person as kind of a mirror. Definitely. And hopefully they're using me as a mirror too.
Yeah, mirror, an ATM, whichever.
Yeah, an ATM.
There's someone else who I had on this podcast years ago. His name is Drew, and he has a nonprofit called Project Live Love. And they do a lot of work with homeless people. They give job training is one thing they do. So they'll connect it with, there's a hotel chain called IGH, one of the two. They own some of the big, I think Holiday Inn or some of the big hotel chains, they're like the parent company. But anyway, they organized with this hotel company to do hospitality training for people. So they'd get them off the street, give them food and train them. Mm. And then at the end, they would give them internships so they could try and get a job at the hotel company. It's kind of cool. So I was doing a documentary for them and I interviewed a whole bunch of people. And I remember distinctly walking into the room and I couldn't, normally you would have this preconception, okay, homeless means they look like this,
right?
Because that's what you see, the people begging on the street. They tend to have torn up shoes or whatever. And they didn't look like it at all. They just looked like any other person. So when we started interviewing, I realized a lot of the people in this program, some people had master degrees in chemistry, or one was an 18-year-old kid who was probably one of the hardest working people I've ever met. He was really intense and focused, but he just had a really bad situation. And the stories just went on and you realize how many people, there were some really fascinating people that are very competent and capable. There's just whatever reason life dealt them a bad hand and they ended up there. It was a very eye-opening experience for me with homelessness, because before that I just didn't have any exposure. That was very interesting.
I'm no expert on homelessness. I just feel like when I've been in bad situations, it's usually just because my mind is turned against me. I've let my mind turn against me. So I think that's, if we have some kind of culture of understanding how this works, I think people will be able to, I have faith that people, or it's logical faith, whatever, that people will be able to steer their lives in such a way that fewer and fewer will be in those situations.
I certainly hope so.
Unless they want to be in those situations. Some people actually like it,
Yeah. Well, I mean, some people just get born in a situation that's very, very difficult to get out of. Like, I noticed this in India. I was wondering, like, how are these people, you go in some of the cities and there's just like tents going on and on and on.
Right.
And it's just their home. They're just living there. A lot of them have some sort of business they do out front, selling things or whatever.
Right.
I'm thinking, like, if you have a kid in this situation, how will they get out? How? I just don't know. There's so many people like that it just blows my mind that we've allowed it to get like this. Look, 7 billion people, and we're just so many people living like that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it would be better it'd be better for everybody if we took care of everybody. Did you think about like how many kids or how many people are in bad situations, and because they're struggling so much to survive, they're not able to really express their full potential. If you have like 70 billion, if you have 7 or 8 billion people, how many people are on the planet now? I don't even know.
7 point some. I think we're coming up on 8.
If you have that many people like expressing their potential, you know how fantastic this world would be. Like how many things would be like created that you couldn't even imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be so great. It'd be like the greatest multiplayer game ever created.
Oh.
Sometimes I think about life as like a multiplayer game. Everybody's like has a character and like are creating a certain part of the world.
Yeah. I think some people think this is all a big simulation, big game.
It's a fun way to look at it that way. But not in a trivial, not to trivialize life, Just to see life more as like a creative play. Mm-hmm. Not like this doesn't mean anything, it's all bullshit. Not in that sense.
Yeah. I know what you mean. What time is it?
3:21.
Well, let me ask you, why are you doing these podcasts?
Okay, I'll give you the backstory, because there's 2 phases of this podcast. One when I first started it, and then one when I restarted it. So when I was in my early 20s, I was an actor, and I was doing other things where I didn't have to really work that much. I had enough money that I could live, and I would just at that time smoke pot and learn everything I could on the internet. Like the internet was my library, and I was just trying to absorb as much as I could. And that was about the time Vice News came out and things like that. So I started just seeing, because it's whatever they're showing on Vice News at that time was not what was on any sort of TV news thing. It was like, for example, I think that was around the time Russia invaded Ukraine and was trying to take over. So they had somebody on the ground, doing a report every single day, right. Just like a 5-minute update. So things like that I was getting exposed to. And I saw, people were dying so much in Venezuela at that time. And I think there was an election in India at the time, and I was seeing these massive mobs of people just furiously angry, fighting each other, shaking fences out of their ground posts and stuff. I just couldn't, I was freaking out. I was like, what is going on? Because I was living in this little bubble in my little Atlanta apartment with, very little need to do much to sustain that. And so I got kind of freaked out, and I thought, okay, there have to be solutions to this. So I started Googling.
But why did you feel like you wanted to create a solution for many of these problems that were in such distant lands?
Well, I mean, not everything was distant, there's still living in Midtown Atlanta, and there's homeless people everywhere, and not so much Midtown, but downtown for sure. There's just a lot of things.
So, okay, so when you say like Venezuela or Ukraine, you're saying more like you saw chaos and near and far.
I saw a lot of people struggling pretty heavily in a way that I never knew. Like, I would say in many ways, I grew up with kind of like middle class, relatively comfortable. I didn't have to worry about survival that much, I didn't have to worry about like violence against me or something like this, So to be exposed to seeing like, okay, there's entire massive populations of people that are in, something's going on that they're that upset, or that many people are being murdered, or like whatever, like something. And I wanted to see like, okay, is there like a solution that's already happened? Like, can we make this not a thing? And when I started Googling, over the next few months, I quickly realized that, okay, pretty much for almost every major global issue, there's already been a solution worked out. It's just a question of either funds or people being willing to implement it, or education, or whatever it takes for that particular solution to be put in place. And so I was like, okay, what do we do? So I decided to build a website, and that website was going to be kind of like Reddit with the up-down voting, except that there would just be a topic, which is like the problem. And there would be 3 sections below, which are up-down voting. So facts, opinions, and solutions. And I thought,
oh, interesting.
Why don't we just do this and like figure it out together? And we can use, crowdfunding was becoming really big at that time. Oh. So like Kickstarter and all that was really getting big. So I thought, okay, we can just use that kind of things to generate whatever money we need when someone proposes how to fix this. And meanwhile, we'll just separate, right? What's the fact and what do you think? And like that. So my thought at that time was, I'll use this podcast to get to know people and see what kind of problems people are having. Because I used to go like, what are the problems you want to fix? Was more like the angle of it. And I thought, based on that, I'll just look up articles and see whatever I can find, and hopefully other people will jump on and make it happen. All that failed because I know nothing about launching a forum. I don't get involved in forums. I don't have the network or the competence to pull that off at that time. And so it was just me on there posting stuff and nobody listening. But there were many other reasons it failed, mostly my lack of, I would say, probably discipline and like ability to follow through on such a massive task.
But you kept the podcast going.
Well, I did probably about 10 or 12 of them, something like that. And at that time, I didn't have this switcher thing I was showing you to flip between. So I had to record the podcast and then go back and watch the whole thing and manually cut each thing, each camera angle. I had 3 camera angles. And it was a very extensive process, and I wasn't good at editing at that time. So it was very tedious, and I got a little burnt out because it wasn't going anywhere. I didn't know how to make that kind of thing happen. I just knew I wanted it to happen, and I had some money saved up. So I just paid someone to build the website, and I started recording the podcasts. But that's how this started. And then more recently, I realized, I actually enjoyed these podcasts, like the sitting and listening thing. And then I found out about this switcher, and I was like, oh, well, for what, $300-400, I can fix the whole problem. I'll just use iPhones and it'll just get cut like in real time if I just have somebody else do the switching. So hence Shravani came here. So she's my switcher. I'm still trying to convince her to do some of these interviews. And so now I just thought, this is just a really nice way to get to know people, because if you look around right now, I feel like from the time I left to India in 2016 till when I came back around 2019, well, basically 2020, the tension is like, you can cut it with a knife. It's just so thick between people. And I just feel like people are getting in these little bubbles on social media of people that agree with them, and they're not listening. So I thought, maybe if there are people from all kinds of places wherever I travel that are willing to just share what they think, we can get to know them, that like context, you know,
Right.
what do you think about things? And then see if that does anything. At least I enjoy it. I learn from each one, so it's nice for me.
Yeah, I think there's, you know, a lot of vocal false starts here. They're like, you know, the internet is just like a tool. And some people use it for these echo chambers. Other people use it for exploration. I'm kind of like, in the last year, I started to see life more as like, more just like a gigantic theme park, which contains like every possibility that you could imagine. Mm-hmm. And the question is like, which rides do you want to go on in your limited time here? So like,
you can do anything, but you can't do everything.
I have no idea. Like, I have no idea like what is going on in society. I have trouble trying to conceptualize like trends, because it's like all the things that feel true to you are just things that you've experienced, you know. It's like the rides that you've gone on. It's like, imagine like United States was like Six Flags, and you had like all the people, I don't know how many rides are on Six Flags, like 20 rides or something
at least.
And then you had like, you got all the people who go to Six Flags regularly, and you got them together and be like, well, what is Six Flags? And you got some group that's, you know, been on these couple of rides, and this group's been on these couple of rides, and they're all trying to talk and like assert like, what is Six Flags? Yeah. In terms of like, what is life? Or like, are people tense or not tense? I don't know. I guess people are, there are trends, but how do you know that those, the question to me is like, how do you know that that's a trend and not like a trend in you?
It's a question.
You know what I mean by that?
Yeah.
I'm not saying you're tense. I'm just saying like in the past, like when I've been in certain moods, you know, it's like I've projected that on the world. You know, you feel like very angry. Then you know, that anger somehow like attracts news that like confirms your anger.
Oh yeah, like
about the world or something. Yeah, it's like so much.
Yeah.
So I wonder how Sadhguru deals with all this.
I don't know.
I mean, he has clarity, right? We hope.
Well, you know, it's funny you're bringing that up, because now I'm thinking about this, my approach to all that. Somehow I was seeing all these problems, and I was looking for solutions to problems, right? When I started international travel, the first international place I went was Peru. And I went in Lima. I spent a week there, and then I went in the jungle, and I saw this like jungle town. I came back to Lima for another week. And I walked way out of the tourist district and like into like the local areas, where this is a 10 million person city. It's huge, and most of it's pretty impoverished. And I just realized there's people living on these hills that don't have running water, and so they go all the way down the hill. That's like the poorest people live in the town. They have to go all the way down the hill, and then the cleanest water they can get is a box of Coca-Cola brand water. And they have to get that all the way back up the hill if they can get it. And just seeing all of that, seeing how these people were, I just kind of reinforced that there's problems in the world. Not that there aren't, but yeah, that's really interesting you brought that up. But as far as Sadhguru,
I guess maybe the difference between these kind of material problems, I think, is more easily to kind of make objective and say, okay, you know, these people need water here. And when it comes to like emotional, psychological, it's a little murkier. it feels to try to assess like what the trends are.
Oh.
Yeah, that's a better way of asking it.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess.
Because for a lot of people, this pandemic situation has been like the worst hell. For some people, it's been life as usual. And for other people, it's been like a year of tremendous growth and possibilities. Like, what is it? I don't know. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it hurting the majority of people emotionally? Is it helping them emotionally in the long run? Like, what time scale do you want to look at? I have no idea.
Yeah.
I hope it's helping. I hope it's...
I feel like it's a situation where, kind of like Sadhguru says, you can use anything for growth. Like, it's pushing us. The virus is pushing us. We have to start doing certain things because people are just dying. So like we would have never shut down an economy before, right? Like, right. So that's like an external thing pushing us.
There's a lot of people reevaluate priorities.
What do we do? A lot of people thinking about like in Texas, they had that whole cold snap that froze everybody. So like, okay, maybe we should put a little bit more effort in winterizing and maintenance stuff and infrastructure or whatever. It's just kind of like, if you have a house that's a little slightly dilapidated, but it's doing the job in gentle weather, and then a hurricane, a tornado, or some more extreme situation comes along and it exposes all the faulty spots. So I feel like that's kind of where we're at. And we just have to decide.
So you think the pandemic is good for the collective consciousness? Or is it?
It'll be hard to see. It just depends what we do with it, Like, it can be a very good thing if we choose to make it into that. Not that people dying is good, but that if we allow this to be the motivating factor to decide, like we're at a fork in the road. Do we just try and get back to where we were, which was anyway unsustainable, or do we try and go in a different path, which is unknown? Who knows where that could be good, could be bad. But this is definitely going off a cliff, the original path we were going down. So I don't know. It'll just be time will tell. I hope we turn it into something that's good for everybody, but not a lot of evidence throughout human history that that's what'll happen.
So maybe the pandemic is like a cosmic.
I think it's a catalyst. We'll see what the chemical change happens, but I don't know. It's a big question mark, is what it is for me.
I have no idea. I thought I knew something at the beginning of the pandemic of what it was.
Yeah?
I thought I knew, but now I don't.
So I like to end a lot of these with just kind of a fun, what's next for you in your life right now?
So there's a couple projects that I've been working on that I want to finish. So I this year, with more of the free time lockdowns, I wrote the first draft of a novel. Mm-hmm. I want to edit that and work on that and sort of polish that story. When I was younger, I wanted to write because of the potential validation it would bring me. If I write some great piece of literature or something, everybody's like, Justin, the smart guy, or whatever. Man, he's smart. But now it's more like I really feel like if you write a story which is transformative in nature, like a really good story. Any great story, the character has a strong desire in the beginning, and then as the character goes toward the middle and end of the story, they surrender something that they thought was true. And as a result of that, they're transformed. Mm. It's like if you can write a story like that and really write a powerful one that you read and experience it as true. Factually, it may not be true. It could be set in the year 2500 where space aliens are growing cotton or whatever it is. But
Space aliens growing cotton.
but if emotionally it's true, and like experientially you read it and you're in this world and it's like makes sense. It's like, I think if you write a story like that, then you can effectively change your mind and sort of what the DNA of your own story is. It's like you change that somehow. And then as a result of that, you change the direction of your life and how you may not even change the direction of your life. I mean, the same things are happening, but you change the perception of it. Your experience of it is different. So that's my real motivation to finish this thing.
It's like a method of transformation for you.
Yeah. And then maybe life gets better. So I want to do that. And then I've been more and more interested in playing competitive tennis, playing more tournaments, working on my own game to develop a certain side of myself that I never had growing up, which is kind of like I was telling you in the car yesterday. This more assertive kind of masculine side that's not afraid to, stand up for something that you feel is true, or stand up for the way that you want to go through your life. In sport, it's so important to not be intimidated, especially as you play at higher and higher levels. And there are all kinds of tests to see that you really get it. You play all kinds of people who use different tactics and head games to see, like, people are trying to throw you off, sort of test whether do you truly have that inner balance?
Is the yoga working?
Yeah, is the yoga working? It's like an evaluation. When I play a tennis tournament, like I play a tennis match, it's like it really shows me, okay, where am I at? What's actually going here? Because you can't.
So you've gone back to school.
If you have this idea, you do all this yoga, and I have this idea like, I'm very a peaceful, loving person or whatever. And then I go into a tennis match and I'm getting beat, or the guy is treating me is acting in a certain way. And then there's like some intense anger or imbalance. You're like, okay, well, that's where I am. Mm-hmm. Can't lie about that.
Yeah. It's hard to be honest with yourself about that when you never put yourself in those situations where you're kind of pushed to see what happens.
Yeah, it's like more extreme, intense situation to push you, to test what's going on.
Yeah.
I guess battle would be like the ultimate situation for that. But I don't want to be in a battle.
No thanks.
But tennis maybe is the closest thing to that I'd like to get involved with, because it is a sort of fight. It's like boxing, but you don't have to get hit in the face.
Yeah, just a ball to the face.
You just get emotionally bruised if you allow it. So those two things are the main things I'm interested in, and making that happen. I think I can do it. It just takes a little more awareness and understanding of my mind, and being able to get control of it and not just let it run its past patterns. Because if it does that, then I'm just going to do what I've always done.
Just keep looping.
Yeah, just keep looping.
Fair enough.
All right. Well, thank you. This has been really... I hope if anybody's listening to this, I said something that makes sense and is helpful. A lot of these questions, I never really thought about them in these ways. So,
well, I hope I was stringing it together loosely helpful. Every time I do one of these, I'm trying to see how to make it a little better, a little easier, better flow kind of thing. But
it's always more interesting to think about things and answer questions in ways that you've never done before. It's like just giving the canned answer is sort of boring to speak and also to listen to.
Fair enough. I think that's why we get frustrated with politicians. Like, you've prepared this too much.
Yeah, they can.
Anyway, thanks so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it.
And thanks, Rob, for being the powerful woman behind the scenes, the boss. Someone else called her the boss, and it was funny.
Yeah, best of luck to everybody. So.
Yeah. Anyway, I hope you're having a good day wherever you are, and we'll catch you in the next one.
All right. Take it easy.